Hey, it's Diane Strong with Bourbon on the Banks Festival. We're here on this rainy day at the Corner Rick House, which is Frankfort Bourbon Society's home. And we're going to interview Jim Shannon with the Bourbon Road. Come on in, let's go check it out. Jim Shannon, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Undressing Bourbon. We're bringing it home this season, and I am so excited to talk to you because you have interviewed me several times for Bourbon on the Banks Festival, but I feel like we don't know you, and this is a great opportunity to get to know you.
Do you really want to know me?
I do. And I will say that I look up to you as an interviewer. I think you are very thoughtful in your questions, and you tend to know what the interviewee wants to say in advance, and I hope I can do you some justice. So,
well, you're very kind. Thank you so much.
Yes.
It's my pleasure to be here. I really have been looking forward to this ever since you mentioned it to me, and this is a great opportunity for me, just like you. I mean, I love to come on a show and talk about what we do, and absolutely love having you on our show as well. And we're going to do that again real soon.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. So if people don't know, you have a podcast. We tend to interview people that are in distilleries or working in a distillery, master distiller, whatever. But you do a bourbon podcast. So you're still in the industry, and you're important, I think, to talk about. So how in the world did you end up with a podcast?
Well, it's an interesting story. It's not a long story, but I had I had a friend who had a YouTube channel, and a lot of your viewers may know him. His name's Jason Clory. He runs the Mash and Drum, and we were great friends, and we would hang out together a lot. And I thought, this is pretty cool what he does. This is pretty neat that he's able to go around and interview distillers and taste and review whiskeys and do all that. And I thought, but I really don't want to be on television. I don't do a podcast. I can do that. It's fairly simple. I'm an engineer, so I'm sure I can figure it out. But so that kind of got me on my start, and that was in March of 2019, I guess. So I'm starting my 6th year now. Okay. So did you already have a very deep love of bourbon at that point? I did. I think, I kind of got not reintroduced, but reinvigorated in bourbon around 2014 or 2015. And at that time, it was still pretty easy to get your hands on the things you liked. It wasn't too difficult at that time. If you wanted a fairly nice bottle, you could still find it on the shelves. And I had a few friends that drank bourbon, and we got kind of excited about it a little bit. It kind of, I think that's when things were kind of picking up a little bit. Yeah. And, it just kind of took off for me again. I got really interested in it again. I started following YouTube channels, following, podcasts, just reading what I could, books, that kind of stuff, and just kind of got into it, kind of like a hobby. Sure. An expensive hobby. A very expensive hobby. Yeah. So did you have a collection before you started the podcast? I'm sure as a host for a podcast, a lot of people send you bottles, right? Yeah, we've got a few. A few. But did you have a lot of bottles before? Not a lot, probably a dozen or so. But they were drinkers, right? I didn't collect the bottles or anything like that. But I had, probably a dozen bottles that I felt were things that I like to visit again and again, time to time. And sure. Yeah, it was always nice to have them on hand when somebody would come to the house, or I would go there and take a bottle with me. You never want to go empty-handed when you're visiting someone, so. No. So is bourbon something that was in your family before you started liking it? Is it? Not really. My father was vice president of Coca-Cola, so he was really big into the soft drink industry. And I know he had some interactions with Maker's Mark and things like that because he was very highly placed in Coca-Cola, but we didn't really have it around the house. that much when I was growing up. I was kind of a high school sports guy anyway, so I wouldn't have done much of, fooling around with it. A beer here and there when nobody's looking, but I was pretty straightforward.
So do you remember your first try of bourbon?
I do. I remember my first bourbon was Wild Turkey 101, and it was in 1981 when I came of age. So in Ohio at the time, you had to be 18 to go to a bar, and you could drink 3.2 beer legally.
Oh, wow.
You had to be 21 to drink full-strength beer or to order spirits. But once you were in the bar, you could have what you wanted. And, pretty much. So it was Wild Turkey 101 on my 18th birthday. So
was it a good experience?
It was a great experience.
Did the night ended well still?
It did. I wasn't a wild person.
Right.
I loved to hang out with my friends. I loved to have a few drinks. And I joined the Navy shortly after that and was certainly out many nights in ports, wherever. And but I always kept it under control. Didn't really get too crazy.
Very nice. Well, a lot of times when I ask people what their first experience was like, they kind of roll their eyes and they'd like to forget it. So that's good to know.
Yeah.
When you think back to where you are now, is there any particular person that you think had a huge influence on you?
Well, there's been a number of people who have, because I haven't done this alone. I've had a lot of help over the years. My first co-host, and I've had a couple of co-hosts, but my first co-host, Randy Minnick, he took the plunge with me. I probably wouldn't have done this by myself. I just, I feel like, at least for me, a podcast kind of needs a co-host, right? You kind of need that other person. You can't have a guest every week, or maybe you can. You're able to, I think, but it's hard to arrange a guest every week. So sometimes it's nice just to sit down with a couple of bottles with your co-host and do some reviews.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that. So my co-hosts over the years have played a big part in this. I think my inspiration came from Jason Clory from the Mash and Drum. He still has a great YouTube channel, tremendous number of followers. Chad and Sarah from It's Bourbon Night.
Oh, yeah.
I got a lot of inspiration from them.
They are great.
Yeah, they are very good. I can still remember going to their very first user meet at the racetrack in Lexington, and they had it out in the I don't know what they call that, the kind of the area in the back where you tailgate.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the hill or something.
And they handed out their very first challenge coins. They were handing out challenge coins. You know what a challenge coin is?
No.
It's kind of a membership coin. It's just a little coin for the organization. And I got number 001, and I still have that.
Ooh.
There's a number. Chad and Sarah, look me up. I might trade you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very cool.
But yeah, I think that, and that's kind of the way it is in this business, is that everybody's so giving and so forthcoming with help when you need it. And it's really nice. Love the people.
I hear you there. I agree 100%. We're doing these interviews, and of course there's YouTubers out there and TikTok people and podcasters. So, I mean, distilleries are important to the industry, magazines are important, but why is what you do important to the industry?
Well, I think we can connect a little bit more than the written word with people when they're listening to or watching, in this case, our episodes. We really can connect with them. One of the things that I like to do is to review. When I review a bourbon, I talk about it in terms that kind of an average new person in bourbon can understand. I try not to use tasting notes that are too obscure, things that people may or may not have tried. I love to use candies, cupcakes, sodas,
stuff people
cereals,
can relate to instantly.
Things that people can relate to. And so tasting notes that talk about Pop Rocks or, Werther's hard candies or, something like that, or Necco candies or something like that. When you get those flavor notes and you use those, I think it helps you to connect with the listener and they're able to really understand what you're tasting. And then we hear back. They'll go buy a bottle they hear about on the show, and they'll come back and they'll write to us in our private Facebook group. They'll say, "Hey, I tried this, and you're right. There's pop rocks on that, no doubt." And that's kind of fun, and I enjoy that. I enjoy connecting with the listeners. I think a lot of times you need to have, in addition to your podcast or your YouTube channel, whatever it is, you need to have another means to communicate with them. Like we have a private Facebook channel where we can get in there and just talk with them. Or some people have a Discord or some, different ways of being able to communicate and really make it personal for the people.
Sure.
And I think it makes a big difference. It really does. One of the things that we try to do also is we don't really talk about what you shouldn't drink, right? We don't really have that on the show. We won't, like if I taste all the whiskeys before they come on the show. And if I'm not happy with one for some reason, I just won't have it on. And I'll call the distiller back or the business back and say, "Thank you for sending it. It's not quite there yet for me.
Yeah.
Try again." And I'd love to try it again, but we just don't have them on the show. So we'll only talk about whiskeys that we would recommend to people on the show. So if you want to know what to drink, listen to the Bourbon Road. If you want to know what not to drink, there's plenty of channels out there that'll tell you what not to drink. But I think it's important that we don't take lightly what we do and how many people we have contact with. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people have listened to these podcasts. And if I say something detrimental to a small brand, it could really hurt them. And they're just trying to get it right. They're just trying to build a brand. They're just trying to get it right. And the next time through, or a little more time in the barrel, it's going to be fine. It's just not ready yet.
Right.
And I don't want to damage them. So, but when we do taste a whiskey, if I'm tasting a whiskey, let's say and this was just on a recent episode, I had some Bullet 10-year bourbon, and I was drinking it. And I said, this is really good, but it's got no finish. It just falls off at the end. That kind of honesty, I don't mind sharing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a bad whiskey. I paid $50 for the bottle. I'd do it again. But the listeners need to know that.
Yeah.
So just be fair about it, but just don't be damaging to people. So.
Absolutely. Very respectable. This is a silly question, but if you got to name a bourbon, what bourbon would represent Jim? What name would it?
I like the bourbons that are named after like family members from the past.
Okay.
That's kind of cool. I like that. I did make a blend once. I blended myself, and I made a label and everything for it and put it on the bottle, and I called it Old Hoot because my grandfather's nickname was Hoot.
That's a great nickname.
And he was a true Kentuckian through and through, loved to hunt and fish, and he had a few drinks here and there. He had nothing to do with the industry. He didn't make anything, but
did he drink bourbon?
I'm sure he did. Yes, I don't remember. He passed away when I was younger, but I'm sure I knew he drank. I just don't know what he drank. It was probably bourbon, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So I named that my personal blend, Old Hoot. So
it's nice.
Yeah.
So your bottle you're creating, is it a cask strength? Is it?
It's at least 115 proof.
Okay.
Probably right at 115 proof.
What's the mash bill going to be?
It is definitely a rye.
Yes.
Rye bourbon mash bill. And I wouldn't be opposed to a 4-grain, but I got to have some rye in it. Mm-hmm. In fact, ryes for me are very important. I really love rye whiskeys.
Yes.
But you said bourbon, so bourbon it is. Rye bourbon.
Okay.
115 proof. Might even finish it. In something maybe a port, maybe a tawny port barrel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, fancy. So is there a special place that you like to go at the end of the day and relax and have your little bourbon nightcap?
I do. Well, anywhere I can sit down with my wife and have a drink is great. I love that. But we have this little room on the back of the house that I built and my wife designed. It's just a little Four Seasons room. Mm-hmm. And it's small, but it's got big windows and they face our pasture. We can see the horses there. So we'll go out and open a bottle and sit in that room and just look out the windows. And windows. I do say windows.
That works.
We'll just sit out there and watch the horses and just relax. It's like the picturesque Kentucky view. And if you got a little Kentucky bourbon there,
That sounds perfect.
it's really good. It's our place.
I like that. Well, Jim, this has been fun. And I appreciate you joining us for this episode of Undressing Bourbon. How about we cheers to Hoot?
Absolutely. Cheers.
To Hoot.
To Hoot.
Thank you. And on behalf of Bourbon on the Banks Festival and the Undressing Bourbon team, thank you for joining us for this episode. Cheers.
Cheers.